Hello and welcome into the No Coast Bias NFL podcast. Post Super Bowl now, the 2015 season has concluded. I'm Robert Zaglinski. Farzin Vasugian is out, so I'm hosting today. Nate Vieira joining me, and Danny Troutman. How are you guys?
Excellent.
Good.
Let's jump right into it. Obviously, the story. The champions, the Denver Broncos, win Super Bowl 50 over the Panthers, 24-10. Von Miller, the Super Bowl MVP. He's going to cash in pretty hard, considering he's a restricted free agent, and the Broncos are going to do everything to retain him. Peyton Manning, the Broncos quarterback, is to finish his career on a Super Bowl win while not doing really anything to contribute to the win. The Denver defense, through and through, controlled the game. Nate, I'm going to start with you. Why did the Broncos win the Super Bowl, and what stood out to you?
What stood out to me the most was the Super Bowl was horrible, just from start to finish. It was just trash. Everything about it.
The hot takes are.
That's just the truth. When you're watching that game, were you at any point excited besides the Von Miller caused fumble in the end zone, and Brandon McManus' 13 field goals? Other than that, were you excited watching the game?
I thought the Jericho Cotchery non-catch was exciting for the 30 seconds.
Shout out to Mike Carey, by the way.
Shout out to Mike Carey. But so why did the Broncos win, Nate? How did they pull this off? I mean, they weren't exactly the strongest, most balanced team.
They had the best defense in the league, and I said it throughout the whole playoffs. The Panthers wide receivers are trash, but they just kept playing good. All of a sudden, the biggest game of their careers, Jericho Cotchery looked like Jericho Cotchery. Ted Ginn looked like Ted Ginn. Corey Brown, I think his nickname's Philly Brown. I heard that thrown around a few times.
Yes,
turned out to be Corey Brown. Mike Tolbert turned out to be Mike Tolbert. So who the Panthers offense was, who we knew him as, is what we saw in the Super Bowl. What we saw from week one to the NFC Championship game was who they weren't. So that's how the Broncos won. Their defense is really good. The Panthers offense, outside of Cam Newton and Jonathan Stewart, was trash.
That's a bitter Patriots fan, and we don't blame him. Danny, Nate brings up a good point. We sort of talked about this all season as a possible concern for the Panthers, that maybe their supporting cast wasn't as viable or able to stand up to pressure in big games. It wasn't a problem against Seattle in the playoffs. It wasn't a problem against Arizona, two huge contenders, two really good teams. But the Super Bowl, I guess, sort of showed us that Cam Newton really was the MVP, considering how he carried along this cast. Was it more a credit to Carolina's, or rather, was the game more to Carolina's roster flaws, or did Denver just take over?
I would say you got to give Denver credit where credit's due. Like Nate just talked about, we all season long we brought up the mediocrity of Carolina's offense and talked about that, and then they just kept performing and surprising everybody. I just talked about it last week and then proceeded to still say that terrible offense, that mediocre offense, I should say, was going to put up 38 points or something like that. It was my prediction. So I went against all my better judgments in that and should have stuck with the whole defense wins championships mantra. That obviously came through and showed again. Manning and the Broncos offense didn't do anything overwhelming by any means. They looked just as average as they did all season. But Carolina, like Nate said, had been overperforming all season long. They'd been making Teddy Ginn and Philly Brown look like all-stars, and Mike Tolbert and Jonathan Stewart looking like they were 23 years old again. And Denver is the best defense in the league and really just put them in their place. So you got to give credit where it's due and give credit to that Broncos defense for sure.
We'll talk about another issue with Newton later on, but does Cam Newton deserve criticism for his performance on the field, for his sort of body language on the field? He wasn't exactly great either, 18 for 41, 265 yards, no touchdowns. Does he deserve any heat for it? And interception, yes. Does he deserve any heat for it?
Yeah,
I think
when you
so, especially because he came out and said, for the reason he didn't jump on that fumble was because he didn't want to get hurt, which
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants to get hurt, but I've never in a sporting event since I was old enough to remember myself playing sports ducked out of a situation because I was scared of getting hurt. You always dive right in, and oh shit, I got hurt. If that's the case. So I think the fact that he said that and his body language on the field definitely hurts his already hated on reputation, I guess, that we've seen also from basically social media and that sort of thing. But I think he does need to take some heat for it because they were never at any point out of that game until the last 3 minutes of it. I mean, it was a 2-touchdown game at the end. So at any point, we've seen games get completely reversed. We saw Seattle come back, 35 points straight against, was it this Carolina team, just a few weeks ago. So it is possible. They were never out of the game, and the way that his attitude kind of showed was kind of disappointing, I would say.
Nate, do you want to add anything to that?
I was going to say, when you're the MVP of the league, granted, what he's working with, it's what he's been working with all season. So you got to make wine out of water. Yeah, that's what he's been doing. He's got to just pull through that still. His performance was subpar at best. Not diving on that fumble, no matter how much time was left in the game. It's a Super Bowl. You have Thomas Davis playing with a stitched-up arm, which I have to give him credit for. I didn't think he was going to play. But
did you see the picture of that thing, by the way?
Yeah, he had a football.
It looks like a football. It looks like a football. Is that permanent? I wanted to ask one of you guys. I'm not sure if is that permanent. Are they going to be able to fix that and make it look normal? Does he have that the rest of his life? Because that kind of sucks.
I think he'll go back to normal. I think he had just gotten his cast off or something, and arms always look weird and disgusting after you just get a cast removed. So
yeah, and that would just look disgusting when I first saw that. I wanted to puke. I honestly thought it was just like a normal football, and then you had to do a double take and realize this is some guy's arm who just played in the Super Bowl, and we have Cam Newton who I guess made a business decision or whatever not to dive on a football, but it's still the Super Bowl. You got to lay it all on the line.
All credit to the Broncos defense, since we're talking about them beating Newton down. As no NFL, I thought this was an interesting statistic. No NFL MVP, regular season MVP, has won the Super Bowl since Kurt Warner in 1999. Some recent examples, obviously Newton on Sunday. Peyton Manning obviously was embarrassed on the big stage 2 years ago against the Seahawks. You had Aaron Rodgers in a 15-1 season 4 years ago in 2011. Brady in 2012. So it goes to show you that maybe the individual greatness of a quarterback isn't everything we make it out to be. That being said, Danny Trevathan, inside linebacker for the Broncos, brought up an interesting conversational point. I think it's a little blasphemous, but he compared his 2015 Broncos defense to the 85 Bears, and I thought this would be interesting comparison. Where does this Broncos defense rank all time? I'm not sure if it's, in my mind, I'm not sure if it's necessarily historic, but they're definitely among that group, among the 2000 Ravens, the 2013 Seahawks, the 85 Bears, as Trevathan noted. In your guys' mind, what's their place in history? Danny, I'll start with you.
I would tend to agree with you to a point. I don't think they're in that conversation because they were the best defense of the year. They dominated better than any other defense did all season. So in that regard, you put them in that conversation. But I'm not going to put them in the conversation with the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens. I think they were great. They were solid, obviously the best of the year, but they weren't historical good. Pulling up some stats, the 85 Bears allowed 12.4 points per game. The 2000 Ravens allowed 10.3 points per game. This Broncos team allowed 18.5 points a game. So while they had some excellent players, and I don't want to downplay what they did this season because they were very dominant. I'm not going to crown them as a top 5 or a top 10 or anything like that. I think they were great, but I don't think you put them in that conversation.
The only thing with me is that sometimes it's hard to compare teams from different eras. Like the '85 Bears, they played 30 years ago when football and the NFL were an inherently different league. So it's sort of, I mean, I think it's easy to say that they're so much better when maybe they're not as schematically advanced or playbook wise as or as able to be adjusted well into this passing era we're in now. I mean, they played more in a smash mouth. They played more smash mouth football. That being said, I think physically and talent wise, you also have to account for the Broncos defense was. This Broncos defense was as loaded as any recent defense, but I'm not sure if they necessarily have 6 or 7 Hall of Famers like those other units that we noted. Nate, what's your stance on this?
Yeah, I'm kind of half and half on both. I'm not too big on comparing teams from like the 2000s and then the 90s, 80s, especially like defense-wise, because back in the 80s, 70s, 90s, or early 90s, it's all running the ball. Now it's just a passing league, so if you can get to the quarterback, that's half the battle, and that's what this defense was able to do. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, Derek Wolfe, Brandon Marshall, Shane Ray a little here and there. So they were phenomenal up front, and then they just have Talib out back, Chris Harris, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the league, TJ Ward. So for this era, they were a dominant defense. I don't know how they would do if we could somehow compare from like this defense, put them in like the 80s, see how they have to do against those teams. But for like a 2000s defense, I'll say they're up there. I'll put them behind the Seahawks and the Ravens, though, because I think that Seahawks defense was phenomenal in 2013, especially what they did against Peyton Manning, who threw for.
That was when he was still good.
That was when he was on certain substances that we may get into later on. He threw for 55 touchdowns and only put up 8 points in the Super Bowl.
The superstar of the Broncos defense, Von Miller, he's likely going to cash in pretty huge. I mean, he might be the highest paid defensive player in the league at this point, considering that the Broncos are going to do everything in their power to keep him. Is he the best defensive player in the league, or does he make it at least close with someone like J.J. Watt, or is there some other sleeper that I'm not thinking of? Either of you can go run with this one.
I think that he's definitely in the conversation. You got a lot of dominant players that you could. I don't know. I mean, J.J. Watt's obviously kind of a freak of nature. He's kind of one of a kind type of guy. The guy that led the NFL in tackles this year was Navarro Bowman, middle linebacker for the 49ers. I think you could probably. He's over 30 years old at this point. He's recovering from a 2-year being out for 2 years ACL tear. You got and Von Miller's still young. He's on a great defense. I'd like to see if he does end up going somewhere else, which I doubt he will. But if he does, I'd like to see what he could do on a team that wasn't the best defense in the NFL. But I think he's definitely in that conversation. I think you pay that guy. I think he's worth every penny of it. Yeah, he's certainly in the conversation to me.
Nate?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Like, you still, like, J.J. Watt, as much as I hate the guy, he's still by far the most unstoppable force in the NFL on the defensive line, or just defense in general. Like, what offenses have to do to stop him, they'll put 2 guys, they'll throw a tackle, tight end, maybe 2 tight ends, whatever, and he'll still somehow get to the quarterback. Von Miller, I think, will get to that. He's still young. I think him and J.J. Watt were in the same draft class, too, which that 2011 draft class was unbelievable.
Cam Newton.
It was Cam Newton, Patrick Peterson, J.J. Watt,
Von Miller.
Yeah, Von Miller. I don't know why I said Vernon Davis. But still, that's just a whole different topic, that 2011 draft class. But still, even other players like Patrick Peterson, Luke Kuechly, they're still up there. So I'll say Von Miller, just based off his postseason, is on the rise, but I can't put him as the top guy yet.
I'll agree with that. Let's move over to his likely former teammate now. resident superstar corporate shill Peyton Manning likely finishes his last ride in his Super Bowl as a Super Bowl winner. Was this, see, to me, as I've seen all the takes now, I've seen him being named as one of the greatest quarterbacks ever because he somehow got this second Super Bowl, being carried by the coattails of one of the greatest defenses ever. Is this the biggest farce of a revenge or redemption story in recent memory? Is this narrative too played out by the TV networks? Because I think we can all agree, objectively as football fans, I mean, obviously, some of us have more Peyton Manning hatred than others, but objectively as football fans, Peyton really didn't do anything to win this year's Super Bowl, and how it's played out, it's as if he's being eulogized or he died at this point. And then it even goes also without saying that in a year where he can finish out on top, where he can be Cinderella and leave the game, he has to plug Budweiser in his post-game interview. He has to make sure when the camera cuts to him in the pregame for introducing all the former Super Bowl MVPs that he's sitting in front of a pallet of Gatorades, drinking Gatorade with the logo clearly visible on both the bottle and the pallet. And then he has to make sure to endorse Papa John's, kissing Papa John before his wife and kids, as he noted in his own post-game interview. So I don't know what the deal with this guy is. I mean, for me, let's start with this question. Is this narrative too played out by the media of Peyton Manning, of this redemption or this swan song? Danny?
Absolutely, and we talked about it last week, and I was the guy that was saying, God, I hope the Broncos don't win because this is exactly what's going to happen, and guess what? It's happening. He got all the credit for throwing for 140 yards. He hasn't been the superstar by any means all season long, didn't play for over half of it, and now he's being crowned as a two-time winner, a two-time Super Bowl winner, and they're going to put him on the stage. Broncos and Colts fans are going to put him on a stage as one of the greatest of all time, and like we talked about last week, yeah, he's probably one of the greatest regular season quarterbacks of all time, but he should still have one Super Bowl ring right now. He certainly didn't earn this one on his own. He definitely got plenty of help from that dominant defense. But, yeah, it's just going to drive me crazy for God knows how long, until the end of time, that they're going to crown him as one of the greatest because he's got a second ring.
You brought up a good point. Basically, the Broncos, Floyd Mayweather that entire Super Bowl. They were perfectly content going 3-and-out as long as they didn't let Manning decide the game, because they knew if they threw the ball more than 23 times that he did, that there was a risk of throwing a pick. I mean, he even threw a pick right to a defensive end after all in the game. So they did everything possible just to let Von Miller. They had all the confidence in the defense and no confidence in him, and somehow his second Super Bowl is going to make him one of the greatest ever. By to some people, as if he deserved this after all the 15 years of suffering, after being able to suffer through learning Gary Kubiak's offense. What a human! What a tragedy! What a rocky underdog story. Nate, I know you're dying to jump in.
I was just gonna let you keep going on. That was getting deep. Yeah,
continue.
Yeah, this whole narrative is just it's the worst thing that could ever happen to any non-Colts or Broncos fan. Because you turn on ESPN any hour of the day, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be talking about how Peyton Manning's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, how he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, how he's the top dog of everything in life. It's horrible. It's the worst thing that could have happened. I didn't care about the Super Bowl at all as much as I would have, obviously, if the Patriots were in it. But Peyton Manning winning just made it that much worse.
One thing I will say, as much as it was terrible, I can't hate on a guy for doing all his stupid endorsement shit.
Come on, you have to hate on a guy for doing that. Are you serious?
Hear me out. He even plugged Disney World. I wanted to add that. He wasn't the MVP, and he plugged Disney World. But so this is his last year playing. That was his last post-game interview he's ever going to have, and he probably just earned himself like $4 million in 10 minutes after that game. So, I mean, I'm not going to hate on a guy for earning that kind of money in his last 10 minutes ever as an athlete. So I got to give him props there. But as much as I hated it, I got to give him credit for earning that money.
But he already has like $150 million net worth. And and you know damn well that he's going to be in so many freaking commercials. He's going to be the next Brett Favre. We're going to see him in Wrangler commercials in about 2 or 3 years.
If you're worth $150 million and somebody says, hey, I'm going to give you $5 million for 10 minutes worth of work, are you going to say no?
I wouldn't say no, but that's like the ending of your career. You can't be like, oh, thank my team or thank my anything. No, he has to plug Budweiser. He has to plug all that crap. He's such a corporate shill.
No, I agree.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I agree with all that too. But if someone was giving me that much money right now, I would plug endorsements the rest of my life. Just having a normal conversation at Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, you try that new Reese's Pieces peanut butter cup from Friendly Ice Cream. That's delicious, by the way. So yeah, I'll plug anything if I can make $10 million in a second.
This is a nice segue into the next question of Peyton Manning, and Danny sort of already touched on it. How are you going to remember Peyton Manning? You can take either a biased perspective or an unbiased perspective on this. Nate, I'll let you start. Feel free to shoot a hot take if you want.
I'll remember Peyton Manning in many ways, I guess more recently being the worst quarterback ever to play in the Super Bowl.
Lowest quarterback rating ever by Super Bowl winning quarterback, yes, you are correct.
Trent Dilfer had a better Super Bowl than him.
Trent Dilfer threw a touchdown and didn't throw a pick. So there's that.
And threw for more yards.
Threw for more yards. I think he had like a 60-yard touchdown pass or something to Brandon Stokely. So there's that. Yeah. But anyway.
That's more recently how I remember him. Also, certain allegations that most media outlets won't touch on, and how he did other stuff like sending fake cops to go beat the crap out of some guy, and then all that fun stuff. But ESPN doesn't talk about that. But I guess, he's a scumbag. But he's also a great quarterback, and that's how I remember him. I'll remember him as Eli's brother.
Awesome. I really wish that that whole sending private investigators to that dude's house would have got more coverage this week. That was an interesting story for sure. I'm in the same. I mean, I'm not going to remember him as the worst quarterback in recent memory, or Super Bowl memory. I actually didn't realize that rating stat until you guys just said it, but that is good to know for sure. I'm going to remember him as a great quarterback in the regular season that won his final Super Bowl on the coattails of somebody else, and I'm going to get annoyed whenever somebody else brings him up. And I do have kind of biased memories of Peyton Manning anyway, because as a Nebraska alumni and fan of my entire life, Nebraska beat Peyton Manning and the Tennessee Volunteers by a whole lot of points in the 1997 national championship, and so I got to watch him be sad and cry then, and that'll be the memory that's ingrained in my head forever, rather than the plugging Budweiser and Disney World.
Yeah, I'll forever remember him choking on big stages, either from, like as you noted, from college to the big leagues. But for me, I just can't get over. I can't get over being the corporate lapdog. It just, at every chance, instead of I understand that I probably would be doing the same thing if I was in his position. But from my perspective, by all respective measures, what should have been a great football moment for Broncos fans and for Colts fans, he turned it into he warped it into his own thing. He warped it into his own story to make his own money, and to me, he can honestly eat shit for that. I don't even want to say. I don't want to even have that as a hot take. I'm exasperated talking about it. And to me, he's honestly one of the most overrated quarterbacks to ever play the game. As you said, Danny, fantastic regular season quarterback, able to put any situation, prepare for any situation. But as soon as improv time comes, as soon as the defense gets physical with him, it's over. And he didn't play well. You saw the same thing in the Super Bowl. Because if the Broncos took the leash off, it would have been the same thing in the Super Bowl. So that's what I'm going to remember Peyton Manning for. Corporate lapdog. Overrated corporate lapdog. Away from our spiraling hot takes, let's move to Cam Newton, to another fantastic opportunity for hot takes. Cam Newton, the MVP, regular season MVP, as we should note, abruptly left the post-Super Bowl press conference after being asked questions about the team, just the general performance. There's speculation as to why he left. There was Chris Harris, the Broncos star corner, in the background with the curtain, really nothing separating them. So talking about how the Broncos were able to lock Newton and the offense down, literally going through the game plan, while simultaneously being asked a question of should Newton blame his teammates for the loss or is it on his teammates? There's no theories, there's no one sure as to why he actually left. Other than Newton, no one will know for sure why he left the press conference, but it's an interesting speculation thing. Obviously, social media, all these sporting websites erupting with their takes, the hot takes, cold takes, whatever, over sportsmanship and over what he's supposed to give to the fans and stand and face the music after being this cocky, arrogant quarterback all the time. In my mind, I'm on his stance. To be a sore loser means you're a loser, so it means that you're okay. If you're not a sore loser, it's in some ways that you're not okay. Sportsmanship is a novelty for Pee-wee football, for high school football. It's the professional leagues. People also are forgetting to note that Peyton Manning walked away, didn't do any press conferences after he lost the Super Bowl to the Saints in 2009, so there's that. Nate, does Cam deserve criticism for this?
Yeah, a little, I guess. But first, I'd just like to thank Powerade for quenching my thirst. It was tough, but I got through it. Powerade zero calories, all the fun. So we'll just go on with that. But for the whole media thing, Chris Harris was like talking. For some reason, they're all in the same like room or whatever, close to it. You could clearly hear Chris Harris basically saying the Broncos' game plan was to make them pass the ball, and I don't even know what the hell's going on right now. But Cam, he deserves some criticism. You're a pro. You gotta act somewhat professional, but at the same time, you throw a camera in someone's face after they lose the biggest game of their career. You're gonna get that sort of reaction with the 1-2 word answers. Not everyone can handle losing the same way. After the game, he hugged Peyton, had a huge smile on his face. I'm assuming he said like congratulations, going out on top, something along those lines. But then after, when he actually like got back into his losing zone, it hurts. It hurts losing the biggest game of your career, especially when you have so much pressure to win. And that's how I would have expected him or anyone else to react.
Danny is. Oh, so no. So go ahead.
I'm on his side also. I mean, I don't know. I think people, as people do on social media and the media in general, tend to react to everything. Yeah, you got a job to do. Yeah, this is part of your job, but should it be in the first place? I've never been a fan of. I mean, yeah, I like to hear interviews and hot takes coming straight out of the player's mouth as much as the next guy, but to jam a microphone in somebody's face the minute after they lose a game like that and expect them not to be pissed off is kind of mind-blowing to me. The same treatment that Marshawn Lynch gave for years and years, the same treatment that countless numbers of players have given forever. It's not a unique situation. It's not new, and people are saying, he shows no leadership. He's not a leader of that team. He should stand there and face the music. And it's like, yeah, he did for a while, and then he was done with it. So let's move on to the next thing and let the guy live his damn life.
Does the hate that has come out of this, is it because people are reacting to all of his perceived arrogance through his dabbing and dancing after touchdowns? Is it because people are like, if you're going to celebrate so much, that you should be able to, stand in that pressure when it finally doesn't go their way? Does America hate the front runner? Is the better question.
I think the biggest reason the heat was on him is because he wasn't using Degree for Men antiperspirant.
I had the perfect pitch for it too. You stole it. I was gonna say losing's like a stinky, sweaty situation. Sometimes you just have to clean it up. But yeah, my whole my whole thing with, like, if you're gonna be cocky, if you can back it up, I have no problem with it. But when it's time to face the music, you have to at least handle it somewhat.
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes if I was playing Cam in Madden on my Sony PlayStation 4, then, you know, I maybe would have stood in on the press conference in my player, but because that game is so interactive and it's in stores available now. But that's just, but that's besides the point. It's just that I'm just interested as to how quickly America reacts. I mean, Cam Newton was, by all effective measure, maybe the most popular quarterback, or this representation of the new, like, young generation this season. The only people that really hated him were, like, opposing fans, Titans fans, for example, or Seahawks fans, or Packers fans. And then it's just easy. It's just funny to see how quickly everything turned, at least from that social media scale. We'll see how we'll monitor this situation as it goes along, or rather Newton, how he responds from this, how he learns from this. I have a feeling the Panthers will be back on this stage sometime soon. So maybe he'll be able to correct his mistakes.
I mean, I honestly don't. I think what he did was exactly fitting to how he's been all year. Yeah, he's been a cocky athlete. He's not a humble guy by any means. He's a cocky guy, and he's arrogant, and that's what makes him as good as he is. And so to sit up there and talk about his loss and quietly sit there and answer everybody's questions is a lot more humble than it is cocky. The cocky thing to do was to get up and walk off stage and be like, I'm out, guys. You know, that's exactly what I would have expected because he's as cocky as he is. And I'm not saying that as a knock. That's why he's as good as he is. But that was right in form with how he's been all season. He hadn't had to talk too much after a loss because, hey, guess what? They only did it once all year prior to that. So we didn't get to see that side of him this year, really, and there you saw it.
Let's move over to the halftime show and the commercials. Not all of us were predisposed. We won't go into the reason as to why, but to be able to necessarily pay attention to all the commercials or the halftime show. The halftime show was Beyonce, Coldplay, everybody's favorite hated band other than Nickelback, and Bruno Mars. So that was the halftime show, and then the commercials, to me, nothing really stood out. There were I had a few favorites or things, or you know, ones that sort of spoke to me. I guess to sound the cliche bullshit, something like that. But I'll start with Nate, since I have a feeling he wasn't as predisposed. Nate, what was your favorite commercial, or what did you see in the halftime show, the crap halftime show that you want to know?
The halftime show, I guess it was like kind of cool that they did like a little tribute for everything, all like the halftime shows. They had Beyonce and Bruno Mars come out, who were like two of the better ones of the past few years, I guess. Coldplay, I really didn't know who they were. I knew one song, the first song they played. Other than that, it was just kind of whatever. And for like commercials, I really didn't pay attention that much. One that stuck out to me the most was the one where the NFL had like 7-year-old kids talking about like how their parents decided to make love after their team won the Super Bowl, which that was very weird. That was disturbing.
So was the NFL basically
the NFL was
telling us to have
implying,
unprotected sex?
the NFL was implying that they're so huge they can make couples have sex and produce babies after the Super Bowl.
No, because that made me wonder if basically
It was weird.
No, I mean, it was weird. So say my Blackhawks have 3 Stanley Cups. So
Technically,
so that means
you should have
there have
three.
been 3 Stanley Cup. There have been 3 generations of Stanley Cup babies.
Yeah, you should have 3 kids right now. If you're a true
I said 3
Blackhawks.
kids. Okay,
If
yeah.
you're a true Blackhawks fan, you should have 3 kids. That's how it goes. I have my little
You have
ones.
unprotected sex, yeah, and you have your Cavs, you have Patriots, yeah.
No, I have my 4 little ones just running around in the common room in like my dorm. I can't keep them in the room. They're too much of a hassle.
That was part of the NFL's Football's Family campaign. What Nate is noting, the Super Bowl babies, was
The place
talked about a commercial.
the place where like they don't approve of it is in the Bible, the New Testament. Check it out in the store now. I got my free one on campus. We're handing them out. Great book, a lot of words, a lot of religion, a lot of meaning. New Testament, Psalms plus Proverbs equals success.
Yeah.
Danny, what stood out to you, man? What are your thoughts on the halftime show or any commercials that you may have?
The halftime show, I remember that those people were all on stage.
Yes, that's a fact. Yes.
That's what I remember about it. One thing I will give the NFL credit for, to a point, is I don't know, a year and a half ago, the NFL was basically saying that they were going to make the artists pay them to have the opportunity to perform at the halftime show. Like, it was that big of a thing, and everybody was like, hell no, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life, and that's never going to happen because nobody's going to play it, right? So they were that cocky about it, and it didn't end up happening, but they were dead serious about it. And so one thing that I'll give them credit for this year was they kind of turned it into a more fun type of thing. They basically turned it into like an all-star game. You know, the all-star show. You got 2 or 3 or however many of them were on stage, I don't remember, all on stage at once. You got Beyonce, some of the biggest names in music, and they're all on stage at once, giving the fans, the people that want to watch them perform, an opportunity to say, you know, hey, this is the best of our generation, whatever you want to say these people are. But this is the best, and we want you to see all of them on stage at the same time. This will be a pretty cool thing. So I can appreciate that in that sense. So, but I don't really remember any commercials either. So you guys will have to take the.
To me, it was a pretty average halftime show. I actually took a quick break during the halftime show to catch Fargo, available on DVD and Blu-ray in stores and on Amazon online. So check that out. But yeah, I didn't really watch that. I didn't really pay attention as much to the halftime show. It was pretty average. I like the tribute to the old performances, like Nate said. I guess it's become sort of a spectacle, as big as the game, as who's playing in the halftime show, the Super Bowl, like America's biggest sporting event. But I've never gotten the hype for it necessarily. Another commercial that stood out to me, basically how weird it was. I mean, there was the Doritos one, where the baby that was in the womb of the mother that was was in labor, where the father threw the Dorito and he kicked himself out. The baby kicked himself out. So there was that.
That was a commercial.
That was a commercial. There's a lot of veiled Illuminati messages in this year's Super Bowl.
What I say? Stay woke.
Stay woke.
And there was also the puppy monkey baby commercial for I believe Mountain Dew Kickstart, which was a big hit at my Super Bowl party for just how weird and stupid it was. I barely remember that it was Mountain Dew being sold, or Mountain Dew being advertised, but pretty weird. Something I'll remember at least for the next few days.
What did you call it?
Puppy monkey baby.
Puppy monkey baby. Sorry, I'm just gonna pull that up on my Apple iPhone. It gets great service 4G. The fastest downloads I've ever experienced.
You have one of those too? No way.
It's almost like we're in sync world. Apple iPhone available now.
Yeah.
No, yeah. To me, commercials. Just as a final note on this, the commercials and the halftime show have always been overplayed. People always talk about how they're watching the Super Bowl for the commercials or to see who's playing. I don't know. It's never been that great to me. A little overhyped. Not as big as or important as the game, you know, at least as a sports fan. So, I mean, there's that. Let's move on, though, to thoughts on the Hall of Fame class of 2006. They will be inducted in August. Some obvious guys got in. Brett Favre will headline it, the longtime Packers quarterback. Had a few seasons in Minnesota and New York as well. Tony Dungy, former Colts and Bucs coach. Kevin Green, the former Pittsburgh Steelers pass rusher and linebacker. Marvin Harrison, who we'll get into why there was a lot of contention over him getting in over others. The former Colts receiver. Orlando Pace, star left tackle for the Rams. Eddie Bartolo Jr., the guy that basically the owner that presided over the entire 49ers glory run, as Danny will have you note. And Ken Stabler, Raiders Hall of Fame quarterback, won Super Bowl with them in the 1970s, 5 straight AFC AFC Championship game appearances, and Dick Stanfill, an offensive lineman, as one of the senior candidates. They're all announced Saturday night. I'll share my thoughts, but to you guys, who was snubbed or who didn't really deserve to get in? I think every Hall of Famer, everyone that's inducted as pre-space deserves to get in. Who, in your mind, the last one got snubbed? Danny.
So one that, and I'm not gonna say I don't know why, but T.O. was one that I would have not necessarily expected to see go in before some of these guys, but you look at a guy like Marvin Harrison. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but T.O. had 50 or 60 touchdowns more than Marvin Harrison, and at one point was probably the most dominant receiver in the league. So to see Harrison, and I don't want to take anything away from Harrison, he was a great receiver, but to see him go in front of T.O., I'm not going to say I'm surprised because he was one of those athletes that was looked on like a Randy Moss or like a Cam Newton of this year, for instance. He was the cocky receiver. He was the guy that did all the ridiculous touchdown dances and stood at the 50-yard line at Cowboy Stadium and did a celebration on the star. And so he was that questionable character guy of that generation. But on the field, he was incredible as a receiver and had significantly more touchdowns than some of the other guys that were in the league that made the Hall before him. So.
Did T.O. not get in because of that questionable character, or because because he moved around teams all the time or didn't win a Super Bowl?
That's what I would think. I mean, as dominant as he was with the 49ers and with the Cowboys, and he did bounce around late in his career like many players do to Philadelphia and a few other places, but that's why I think he didn't make it in. I mean, his on the field, the way he played the game, the way he dominated teams, exceeded. His play was certainly representative of the Hall, I think, but I would say that his character, his questionable decision-making, his celebrations, his off-the-field stuff is why he's not in.
Yeah, T.O. was my big snub too. I thought he should have been in first ballot, or at least over Marvin Harrison. Like, Marvin Harrison had a nice, solid career with Peyton Manning. He got his Super Bowl ring, whatever, but I think T.O. was 1,000 times a better receiver than him, even with his off-the-field antics, doing push-ups in the sit-ups in the driveway, crying about Tony Romo, whatever, having the T.O. Joe show with Chad Johnson. It doesn't matter. T.O., he's a top 3 or 4 wide receiver of all time. I think that's just based on talent alone. That's a reasonable estimate for him, because him and Randy Moss in those days were the most 2 dominant receivers outside of Jerry Rice. But then Tony Dungy getting into, I've never really looked at him as, because this is the first time he's been on the ballot, right? Or was he on?
I think it's like the second or third time. Continue.
That changed it a little. I was going into this thinking it was a first ballot thing for him, but even still, I don't know if Tony Dungy's a real Hall of Fame coach. Because with like the Colts teams he had, he only ended up winning 1 Super Bowl. They had a lot of regular season success, which we know that comes with Peyton Manning too. But then at the same time, you can never like push them to the next level besides the 1 year against Rex Grossman. So that's just the way I look at Tony Dungy. And then shout out to my boy Kenny Stabler getting in. Never seen him play once. Predicted that he'd get in a few weeks back. The Hall of Fame came through, put him in. I'm not going to take full responsibility for it, but maybe I will.
How about Orlando Pace getting in? By all respect of measure, maybe a top 5 offensive left tackle all time, top 5 offensive lineman all time, the real first like pass protecting wall offensive lineman to usher in this new era, so to speak. Is Pace that first sort of domino to fall of modern football? I mean, I'm trying to make this as not cliche as possible, but
I think Jonathan Ogden got in a few years ago, right?
Jonathan Ogden, but he was more of like a mauler. I mean, he was like 6'8", 360, man.
Oh, I was just thinking offensive lineman in general. That's
yeah, generally, yeah.
Because I would say I think like those two were really the two big names back in the early 2000s, late 90s, who were like the most dominant offensive linemen around. Maybe Kevin Mawae too for the Jets. But
Do you got? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say maybe more and more offensive linemen will get some respect, but I don't know. I don't really.
I like it for sure. In the 2000s, 90s age of everybody throwing the ball around and all these all stars or everybody looks at the receivers and the running backs and the skill position players, the quarterbacks, as we always have done, and they're the guys that get the attention. But Orlando Pace was a household name. I mean, when I was a kid watching football, I knew who Orlando Pace was and could pick him out of the lineup and watch him dominate defensive linemen, and it was impressive. So I'm really happy to see him go in. I think he definitely deserved it, and I'd like to see moving forward other offensive linemen, other dominant guys on the O-line that are, the big uglies, as they say. Follow, not follow his lead because it's not like they have a choice in it. But I'd like to see a lot more of that style of player, offensive linemen, and guys that don't typically get the recognition end up in the Hall for sure.
Should Kurt Warner have got in? Former Super Bowl MVP, took two different franchises to the Super Bowl, several passing records, Super Bowl passing records, postseason passing records. Did have a big break in his career in the middle, did falter a little bit after success with the Rams early on for a few years with the Giants, but he came back and reinvigorated himself with the Cardinals. Should Kurt Warner have gotten in on the first ballot? I mean, I think we can pretty much agree that he'll eventually get in, but should he have been in on this one? Danny.
I think it's not horribly upsetting that he didn't make it in on his first ballot. He had some great years, some solid years, but it's not like he made an entire career out of those performances. He had some down years. Hell, he spent some years with the Iowa Barnstormers is kind of where he was found at, and he kind of got into the NFL late as it is. But he had a shorter career, and for a lot of those years he was an average quarterback, and he really came on late, kind of a la, I don't know, Carson Palmer, some of these guys that have kind of come on later in their careers. And I think he definitely deserves to get in, but I'm not horribly upset that he didn't make it his first ballot.
Nate?
Yeah, like if it was me, I maybe would have put him in over Harrison or Dungy, but they already had two QBs getting in. My boy Kenny was getting in, and Favre was an automatic, so I guess that can somehow play a part in it, but he'll get in at some point.
Danny, you're a big Niners fan, obviously. How do you feel about Eddie DeBartolo getting into this Hall of Fame class? There's a lot of speculation as to whether he would be able or whether he would ever get in, considering why he lost the 49ers because of his gambling issues and extortion issues. Do you think he deserved it? How do you feel about it?
Oh, absolutely. And I've obviously got some bias, but he helped sculpt one of the greatest football franchises in the history of the NFL. They had 4 Super Bowls in, 8 years, 9 years, and he was a huge part of that, bringing in the talent at all the right positions and other positions of management. And he kind of picking up Bill Walsh, and that's, I don't know. I mean, like I said, he was over one of the greatest football franchises in history of the NFL. I think he definitely deserved to make it in, although you do hate to see the way he was taken from that position, I guess, because of those issues you talked about. So, but that kind of goes back to what we just talked about with T.O., right? His on the field stuff and why he's not in versus his off the field stuff. So it's kind of the exact opposite of that. But I'm really glad that he did make it in this ballot. So.
Before we move to our next topic, let's just take a quick look at first-year players that will be eligible for the first time for the Hall next season. I have a list up right in front of me. I'm going to go down the line, and you guys can sort of just stop me, or at the end of it, just say someone that stood out to you, of someone that would deserve to get in next season on that first ballot. Brian Dawkins, longtime safety for the Eagles and Broncos. Tommy Harris, defensive tackle for the Bears and Chargers. Chad Johnson, wide receiver or receiver for the Bengals and Patriots. Larry Johnson, Farzine would love this, running back for the Chiefs, Bengals, and Redskins and Dolphins. Thomas Jones, most notably with the Bears and the Jets. Olin Kreutz, I have a soft spot for him, to be honest. Center for the Bears. Matt Light, Patriots. Derek Mason, longtime receiver for the Titans and Ravens, has a Super Bowl ring, or I believe he actually doesn't. No, he doesn't. He lost to the Titans when he played there. D-Mac, Don McNabb, most famous for his Super Bowl vomit. Joey Porter, linebacker for the Steelers and Dolphins and Cardinals. Bob Sanders, career could have been much greater, safety for the Colts. LaDainian Tomlinson, most known for his time with the Chargers, few good seasons with the Jets, running back. Jeremy Shockey, tight end for the Giants and the Saints and the Panthers. And Jason Taylor, longtime fantastic defensive end and linebacker for the Dolphins and Redskins and even Jets. One of the more versatile guys the league has seen on the defensive side of the ball. So, also Hines Ward. So, who sort of sticks out to you guys there as someone that would that should get in on their first try?
Jason Taylor and LT for me.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I was trying to think of like the other names you said, because right when you said Chad Johnson, my head just like went off the rails. I was like, T.O. and Chad Johnson getting in at the same time. That would be poetry. The T.O. show going into the Hall of Fame at the same time. I could die in peace of that.
T.O. show. Oh my God. Plug.
You ever watched the T.O. show?
I love the T.O. show. It was pure crap. That's what made it so good.
That was awesome. Nothing better than looking into the life of Terrell Owens and Chad Ochocinco on VH1. That was a little plug, by the way. But the show's been off the air for like 15 years. But
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think basically LT, Jason Taylor should be the two guarantees. Like Bob Sanders, I don't think he'll ever make it. Donovan McNabb, I don't think really deserves to make it that much. I'm sorry, Hines Ward. Yeah,
I think Hines Ward is a Hall of Famer. I don't think
he'll get in. He'll get in at some point.
He's not a first ballot, but he was a good receiver. I mean, he's the Steelers' all-time leading receiver, and he has 2 Super Bowls. That should count for something.
I think Kreutz and Light will be getting in at some point too. Who else did you say? Joey Porter.
Joey Porter's not getting in.
Yeah.
At all. He wasn't that. He was. See, to me, the thing about a Hall of Famer is they have to stand out among their generation, at least in some way. Like, the guys that get in first ballot are probably the guys that were, like, the superstars, like the absolute superstars. And then the guys that maybe get in their second, third, or even later tries are, they were the stars and they were great, but they weren't as great as those first ballot players. You guys, I mean, I have to agree. Jason Taylor, LT are the only ones that would really deserve it next season. Game changers. LT probably to me, a top 5 running back all time. Jason Taylor, one of the better defensive players to ever play. Really an easy decision. Moving on from players that will retire soon and be eligible themselves later on down the line. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, retired on Twitter, doing the like Mike with his green Under Armour cleats on the power line. What's Marshawn Lynch's legacy? What is he a Hall of Famer? Where do the Seahawks go from here? Are we gonna remember more for his press conferences or for his actual play?
Well, do you remember that run he had against the Saints a few years ago?
Yeah, that was special. That's when Beast Mode was born.
Yeah, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Mainly because the YouTube video that came out from it like a day later. I watched that today just out of remembrance, and I was sitting in my room laughing hysterically for probably 5 minutes. That run with that commentary just deserves to be in the Hall of Fame itself. Then put Marshawn separate maybe a few years later. But his retirement, just the way he did it, like he's a quiet guy. He just posted a nice little picture of throwing up cleats on a power line, little peace emoji, called it a career. That's just Marshawn Lynch summed up in a character and a half on Twitter, I guess. I don't know how many characters emojis count for. But,
1,000 words.
1,000 words per emoji. Yeah. picture's worth 1,000 words, emoji's worth 1,000 pictures, something like that. But yeah, Marshawn. Yeah, but Marshawn, he'll be missed. He's definitely a fan favorite of mine.
As a 49er fan, the last 3 or 4 years I've really hated the Seahawks. Marshawn Lynch wasn't really one of those players that I hated. He was a fun back to watch. I liked his attitude, despite how much he harassed the media, and maybe that's part of why I liked him because I liked the way he brought attention to himself by basically trying not to bring any attention to himself at all. The way he treated the media made me laugh a lot. I would say that I don't know. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame running back. He definitely had some solid years with the Seahawks. His years with the Bills were a little quieter. He is as big a name as he is because of how the media has basically treated him over the last several years. He had a few solid, maybe even great years, but I don't know that deserves him a spot in the Hall of Fame or not. I am going to miss the guy. He's a fun player to watch for sure. Hopefully he still makes some hilarious commercials like that Pepsi one where that girl talks for him, or that one where I've been here the whole time, that one. And so I hope he stays present in the media, but I don't know that he's deserving of a spot in the Hall.
For me, I think I'm like you, Danny. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he was more notable for his time with the Seahawks. He had a lot of troubles in Buffalo. I think people forget he played for the Bills for about 5 or 6 years, where he was really forgotten. But he was still a good running back, but he wasn't as great as he was in Seattle. I'm going to remember him more for like what you guys like, for his fantastic press conferences, for his commercials. He's all about that action. You know why I'm here, turning into the best NFL memes the past year or so. Some inappropriate, obviously. He of all the Seahawks, because I'm like you, Danny, I don't like them either. I actively hate them. Well, he was the one that, like, you just, like, as a football fan, you have to appreciate, too. Like, just watching him play, the power running he has. It almost felt like Marshawn Lynch, to me, was like the Paul Pierce or, like, the guy at the rec center that probably doesn't really work out that much or doesn't really work on his game that much. Like, he has that old man game. He probably plays, like, hardcore softball in the off season, and then just comes back in weighing like as a 230-pound tank running over defenders. That's how I'll always think of him, and that's why it was fun to watch for me. Definitely one of my favorite players in my time watching as a fan. I'll miss him, and I'll miss his personality too. It's easy enough to say that.
Did you mean slow pitch softball?
Slow pitch softball. Sorry, all my plugs for that, all the money I've been making today, all the $50 I've made today, scrambled my brain. So.
Like you say, if Marshawn Lynch is playing hardcore softball, that's, I guess, something I need to do now.
Well, see, the hardcore, because he's an NFL player, so we play slow pitch, he plays hardcore, right? So
yeah, I didn't know if that was like, do you remember that, it's like the LT's football for like the Nintendo 64 or whatever?
Yeah.
No, NFL Blitz, where basically you beat the shit out of someone after the play is over. Mm-hmm. That's what I imagine hardcore softball is. You just run down the first...
NFL Street.
You run down the first base line with a bat as the first baseman tries to catch it. You just take him out right at the knee. Sounds like.
No, I only mentioned that because there was like a feature on him that's what he does in his off season. He just wears like a Dago and some jean shorts and goes out and plays with his buddy for 6 hours. That's what the E60 was on him. It was like an E60 feature.
It was in Compton or wherever he's from, somewhere in California. I think Compton.
Mhm.
Or no, Oakland.
Something like that, yeah. But that's just my thoughts on Lynch, man. He's a hardcore softball player and a great running back and a fun guy. Let's move finally to our final real football topic of the 2015 season. As I noted at the start of the broadcast, we'll be back probably a few weeks from now or a month from now, whenever now, to talk some off-season stuff and prepare for the 2016 season. But as our last look at the 2015 season, what will you guys most remember? What was like a one moment or play or game that can be on or off the field that you guys will forever remember from this season? To me, it was sort of really forgettable. The Super Bowl was one of the worst ones I've really watched, and I'm not saying that just because Peyton Manning won it. It wasn't really aesthetically pleasing. People talking about defense. It was because it was a defensive game, sure, but it doesn't mean it was great to watch. To me, what will stick out the most was how the Panthers rose, how Cam Newton became. We'll see how consistent he's able to sustain this over the next few years and over the rest of his career. But his rise to the superstar he is now, because the Panthers are still going to be great next year and for years to come, that's what I'll remember. And basically the personality that he brought to the NFL with the dabbing and the celebrating, bringing that to the forefront and making the game fun again. That's what I remember from the 2015 season. Danny?
One thing for me, and it's also Panther related, but the pursuit of 16-0, the pursuit of that undefeated season is always fun. It's kind of like in the NBA right now, actively watching the Warriors on their pursuit of beating 72-10, the Bulls' all-time wins record. Watching that happen year after year, and the Patriots did it a couple of years ago and then lost in the playoffs. And there's always a team that goes on a little further than.
Why would you bring that up?
It goes on a little further than you think they would, and just the pursuit of seeing that perfect season go on is entertaining to me, and that's one of the things I always like to watch during the season.
Nate?
To me, there's a lot of stuff. I guess like the Panthers' rise was kind of cool. Like, yeah, that was cool. The whole Deflategate thing pissed me off. Still pisses me off because
that's what stood out to you. You can talk about that. Is that what stood out to you? The 2015 season? Why is that?
It stood out to everyone because they talked about it for over a year now, and it's still going on. And yeah, but besides that, seriously, it's like the whole Cam Newton. It'll be fun to watch to see if he can keep up his play. If the Panthers can somehow get better wide receivers and be a contender for years to come.
I think we can all agree, whether we're Panthers fans or not, that he does make the NFL more fun. Am I wrong?
Yes, you will be wrong soon, because the NFL will most likely make a rule that you can't like sneeze into your elbow anymore.
Can't sneeze?
Yeah, you can't. Whenever you sneeze, I hope you sneeze into your elbow. If you sneeze into your mouth, that's disgusting.
Yeah, Goodell strikes again, man.
I guarantee there's gonna be like a rule for like end zone dancing. It's gonna be like you have 3 seconds to express yourself, or else you're fined like a house.
That's a real shame, because Kleenex, the #1 soft tissue, makes a quality product to be able to blow your nose. That's a shame if Roger Goodell's going to do that to, not use Kleenexes. Make sure to get yourself a box. But anyway. That just about puts a wrap on the 2015 season and any of our conversations on it. The Denver Broncos, Super Bowl champions. Guys, sort of wrapping up the podcast here, top contenders, in a brief sense, in your mind, for the Super Bowl next season. Who's going to be playing on this stage next year? Way too early to talk about this now, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I don't even know if I could like say a team, because every team like kind of needs work. Like the Patriots need better offensive linemen. The Panthers need people who know how to catch the ball when it actually matters.
Offensive line too.
Yeah, that too. The Broncos need to figure out what's going on. They don't even have Brock Osweiler. They don't have a quarterback. They don't need a quarterback. I could have won the game for them. Let's be serious. Peyton Manning's trash. Screw that guy. But who else? The Cardinals. They need to get Tyrann Mathieu back, get healthy. Yeah, Carson Palmer too. He's getting up there. It's too early to tell, but right now I'll basically just say like the Panthers, Broncos, Patriots, Seahawks, Steelers, because they'll be healthy again next year. Those are like the 5 teams I'd watch.
Danny?
A couple that outside of those, half the league that Nate just rattled off in a few seconds there.
I said 5 teams. Do you want me to throw in the 49ers too? Chip Kelly will lead Colin Kaepernick.
Wait, no love for the Lions? Jim Bob Cooter's greatness? The Lions are on the rise, guys.
That's a good point.
Jim Bob has it.
I was going to say another NFC North competitor, but you're probably right. Jim Bob Cooter is going to bring the Lions out of their funk, and they're probably your 2016 NFL champion.
Calvin Johnson was holding them back.
Calvin Johnson was holding them back. One of the greatest receivers ever was holding them back.
Well, two teams that I'll throw out there that were kind of surprises to me and probably a lot of other people this year was the Colts and the Green Bay Packers. You got two quarterbacks that have the potential, and some have already showed that they could be a couple of the greatest that have played. Aaron Rodgers has been solid most of his career and then average this year. Andrew Luck has been solid for his first 3 seasons and then was garbage this year. But those guys still have that talent level. They got some weapons around them. Maybe Eddie Lacy will drop 30 or 40 pounds and get back to his dominant stage. Those teams still have a lot of solid players on them in both regards with the Colts and the Packers. Those are two that I'd like to keep an eye on and see what they can do next year, because they frankly kind of surprised me this year and how I would say they underperformed, even though the Packers made. Did they win that division?
They lost the division. They were a wild card team.
Minnesota. Okay, that's right. That was even kind of an underperformance to me. I would think they should have done better than they did and have that potential next season.
For me, other than obviously the Jim Bob Cooter Lions, because they're going to be a Super Bowl contender sometime soon. You watch. The Ravens, probably the team that was most decimated by injuries this season. They'll be back, and they have John Harbaugh. They have a good staff in place. Mark Trestman, I don't know why he's still employed, but that's not that huge of a factor considering that they have a good core and foundation in place, and they're one of like those model franchises that just knows how to win. They'll be back, and they're going to be in contention. I also like Pittsburgh. I think their young defense is getting better by the day. Obviously, they'll still have an explosive offense. They'll have Le'Veon Bell back. They'll be a team to watch. Danny, you mentioned it, Green Bay, even though they don't have Jim Bob, they're going to be back. They have Aaron Rodgers, who, through most people's opinions, should still be the best quarterback in the league. And then the Patriots and Seahawks. I know I'm leaving out the Panthers, but I have to see, and since we're doing this way too early, I have to see how they upgrade their offensive line and the receivers, because it's really hard to get back to the Super Bowl. And Seattle and New England are those sort of the class of the AFC and the NFC the past few seasons. As far as my Super Bowl pick for next year, in freaking February 2016, Steelers and Packers. I think we'll see a rematch, Super Bowl 45. Moving on, though, Jim Bob Cooter eventually will be in the Super Bowl. But moving on, our final piece. Football's over. Won't be back till late August.
Thank God. I thought it'd never end.
Won't be back till won't be back till late August, early September. What are you guys gonna do now? What other sports will you watch? What other shit will you do to keep yourself occupied until then?
Well, for me, basically I've spent the last 20 Sundays on the couch watching football for 10 or 12 hours a day. So I'm probably going to be spending a lot of time at the Home Depot, my home improvement superstore, with all the greatest products to get some stuff finally fixed up around the house. Other than that, college basketball is a big one for me, one of my favorite things to watch outside of football. I'm a big college basketball fan, and coming up in just a few short weeks is March Madness, which is one of the greatest times of the year.
Nate?
Yeah, I'm really looking
forward. I imagine?
Oh, come on. I was looking forward to pitchers and catchers reporting in like 9 days. That's really cool. I love like spring training baseball when like the Red Sox play the Boston College Eagles down in Fort Myers. Very competitive game. Must watch if you have NESN. I assume everyone has NESN because it's the greatest broadcasting station alive. Shout out to Don Orsillo, who was fired, unfortunately. But yeah, pitchers and catchers report, outfielders, position players report a few days after. It's just a fun time to get pumped up for baseball.
You're not pumped for the Cavs? No mention of the leading team in the Eastern Conference in the NBA?
Yeah, them too, I guess. That should be fun to watch.
You have two jerseys hanging in the background. What happened?
I also had to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but just basically every other sport now. Like the Masters comes up in April. I actually love watching golf. March Madness is always fun, even though I don't really know who's like in it that much. I haven't watched much college basketball. The Little League World Series comes up in what, August? That's exciting. It's a good time for sports now. It's cool that we don't have.
Well,
to,
you know, for me,
it's cool that we can finally go to church and spend our Sundays doing something productive rather than watching football.
well, I'll be watching hockey. You know, defending Stanley Cup champions, Blackhawks, going for back-to-back in their fourth cup in 7 years. So I'll be watching that. Obviously, a big thing here in Chicago. It's just nice mention. You guys don't really want to reacquaint yourself with your family, because I'm not sure if my family knows who I am anymore, considering all the time I've spent watching football the past few months. That's not a concern for you guys?
I've been away at school. Like, I have to go home in like a few weeks for like a baptism, but then I'm back up here watching some spring training baseball. Come on, it's the best time of the year.
My wife will probably get a lot more annoyed with me now that she'll have to see me more often on Sundays. But other than that,
Do you just have like a man cave, or you just grunt? You're going to her couch.
yeah, she typically
She knew the signal. It's like, all right. I'll see
she
you
doesn't
then.
come downstairs on Sundays during football season.
What you just have to do, you just have to like tell her, oh no, they extended the season by another 13 weeks, so I have to go watch it again, and then just like, I don't know.
The
Well,
player.
The downside
player-
of that is that there's if I say that, then there's a lot more time for her to go shopping, which is a bad deal for
I
me.
just gotta get her like one of those Visa credit, not credit cards, one of those Visa like gift cards.
Yeah.
Just tell her it's like, oh, you have fun. It's only like $15.
No, see, we can telegraph this whole lie for you. You can say that the players protested and didn't refuse to cross the line, so the season was locked out for a few months, and then they held the season in Mexico in the spring, so you can buy yourself more time. You know, La Liga, basically.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Soccer. I was watching Liverpool today. It's a great way to spend my time. I love watching football, the real football, because it's more competitive, athletic, interesting.
For those who don't know, Nate is being very...
I disagree that it's
Facetious.
more interesting.
This game came down today to a final kick. Put the ball in the back of the net. West Ham won.
What was it, like 2-1, something like that?
That was the final score.
Oh, Joe, stop. Just because it's low scoring is not interesting. Stop. Don't be a snob, Danny. You're better than that.
I don't like hockey either.
Hockey only starts when like the playoffs start. That's just dead on.
Okay, I will agree with that. Regular season hockey isn't always the best to watch, but to me, like, playoff hockey just supersedes everything else, given like the tension. But that's just me. And even if the Blackhawks weren't good, like if I was just watching playoff hockey, like how it feels. But my personal opinion, obviously. That just about does it, though, guys. It's been fun doing this all season. Hope we'll get Farzine back on when we win this season. Really enjoyed, to do this. I mean, we did this on a basically. I think we missed a few weeks here or there. In like December or something, but we basically did this every week.
I was on like a 17-month hiatus at one point.
Well, you were on like a 2 or 3 month hiatus. You were on injured reserve. We had you on the. We brought you back so we could save the salary cap money. So we had that there for you. The long-term injured reserve. You know, we Ray Lewis'd you. You used the antler spray and you got back in, and you came back in clutch for us, man. I remember that. I remember that.
Just putting me in the same sentence as Ray Lewis is just disrespectful.
Fine, Peyton Manning. You
That's
were
amazing.
also injured for. Fine, you were also injured for 2 months. You were benched, and you came back in, and you won the Super Bowl. You gotta pick one, man.
With the help of some HGH.
With the help of some HGH. No, but seriously though, guys, this has been fun. I hope we continue this further on. I hope we meet back up here in a few weeks, talking like free agency and all that crap and other stuff. It's been a good time. Do we not have a good time on here?
Oh, we absolutely do.
I was having a great time till I got compared to Peyton Manning now.
All right. Well,
Well,
this
Jim
has been
Bob thinks you're great, Nate. So.
you're great. You're great. Yeah.
You're just saying I'm a great regular season QB, and when it actually matters, I can't perform. That's all. The vibe I'm getting right now.
All that matters is what Jim Bob Cooter thinks.
That's all that matters. Jim Bob Cooter thinks highly of you. He thinks highly of this podcast. He thinks highly of us, man. That's all that matters. Jim Bob Cooter, the next Bill Belichick. We never joked about that, in case you understood. Anyway, this has been the NFL No Coast Bias podcast. That wraps up the 2015 season. As I keep saying, we'll be back in a few weeks or so, talking off-season, free agency, draft, all that good stuff. For Nate Vieira, our Peyton Manning, our Ray Lewis, for Danny Troutman, the #1 Jim Tom Sula fan, San Francisco 49er fan. I'm Robert Zaglinski. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back. Stay classy.
Stay classy.